文章を書いてごらん。そこに知ってる言葉を全部書いて形を与える。次に原稿用紙に言葉を並べ直して文章にする。
できるかな。
できるさ。いつか君が小説を書いた時は私にも読ませてほしいね。
This week's episode of Mysterious Disappearances tells the story that for me solidified why I love this story so much. And no, it ain't for the physical physics, nothing like that. Instead, it is a very powerful message to storytellers, but also to people who, like me, might find it difficult sometimes to talk to others. And in this episode, we really learn that it is true that your stories need you need your stories, and the world needs your stories. That is the message of this latest episode. Hi there, everyone. Lars here from Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And in this episode, we've got two different things happening. Towards the end of the episode, we have the setup for the next curiosity, the next monster to be revealed, which is this cute little mermaid thing. Oh boy, we're going to get to some interesting shenanigans with her. However, the majority of the episode is encapsulated in a story that Sumireko tells to Ren as they are at work. Well, after work, actually, because Ren is just impressed with how well Sumireko knows all of these books within a bookstore, and there's just so many books. How on earth does she know them all? Well, she recounts to him how she ended up falling in love with books and why she just wants to write, why she wants to create, and why she wants to read as much as possible. And it is because books are what allowed her to finally find her voice. So in the episode's flashback, we see that as a kid, Sumireko had just a really hard time speaking for herself, being able to articulate the words, the thoughts, the feelings that she had in her heart and in her mind. They were just jumbled up. They were messed up. And for someone like myself who has gone through overcoming a stutter and who still, to a certain degree, has that stutter there, I can empathize with that a whole lot. Now then, speech impediments of various kinds and social anxieties come from all different kinds of places. And this episode isn't about diagnosing Sumireko, but rather showing how, because of this impediment, she's unable to really connect with her friends and let herself be heard in a positive way. As a result, she gets into a lot of fights, and she runs away from her friends after shoving them because she's unable to articulate what she's feeling, to accurately communicate that she's even sorry that she's offended them, that she's hurt them, and so she runs. Well, as she's running, she discovers this amazing building just out in the middle of an abandoned lot that is filled with books, with this very kind woman who runs this bookshop and who lets Sumireko stay there and introduces her to all of these books. And Sumireko begins to lighten up. She begins to communicate a whole lot better. These books speak to her. They allow her to feel emotions. They allow her to see problems. They allow her to go on adventures and sort all of these things out and to finally begin finding the words through which she can then accurately communicate. But there's still an impediment there. And so the woman says, why don't you write? If you write, you then can take the time to pull those words out one piece at a time and put them where they accurately belong. She says, it's not that you can't speak. You are a walking dictionary full of so many words, meanings, ideas, emotions, thoughts that you wish to communicate. What you need to do is you need to learn how to communicate. And for you, maybe the way to do that is not necessarily to speak, but instead to write. And so she challenges Sumireko to begin writing and even says, I now want your book. And so, as a very young girl, Sumireko already now has this great desire to write. And now suddenly things start making a little bit more sense about who she was as a little kid, why things just came to her so naturally, why she was so excited. It isn't just because little kids just have such fantastic and wonderful and boundless imaginations, but because that was when she was most excited to write, because now there was a way for her to speak, and just everything that was bottled up within her now had an outlet. And she's only now rediscovering through this journey that she's been going on with Ren and the curiosities, and even by revisiting this memory, that, wow, I am able to tell so many stories. I'm able to reveal myself and get all of these thoughts out there onto the page, into other people, and I can finally liberate myself from my own self-made prison of just not being able to communicate by writing. This is incredible. Now, when she goes back as an adult to try to find that store again, it's gone. Turns out that this bookstore was a curiosity in and of itself, and that she is now bound by a promise to this wandering curiosity to someday give one of her own books over to the bookstore owner. This is really cool because there's some hints throughout the story leading up to what the fulfillment of that promise is going to be like. And I'm really, really excited. Within the manga, we are far away from that, but there are little clues here and there that give you an idea of what kind of adventure still awaits Sumireko and where everything is ultimately headed. Now, I said at the beginning of this video that this particular story, this particular arc within the manga, is what really solidified my love for this story. Because at this point, it wasn't just then about, oh, here's a person who's been down on their luck, who is a has-been, who has got writer's block and finally discovers the inspiration, who goes on that journey to be a writer. But in this arc, the mangaka, the author, the anime adapters are telling us the power of storytelling. Because for so many people, communication is hard. In fact, it's actually the number one fear that people have, which is public speaking, which public speaking is a form of communication, and public speaking is actually rather nebulous. Nowadays, if people realize that they can be overheard or they're speaking in public, even if they're not speaking to the public, the idea of talking in general terrifies people. It's led people to clamming up. It's led people to not properly or positively or in any kind of healthy way expressing themselves. And how do you overcome such a block? Well, granted, we got texting and everyone loves to go to texting, but texting is just so straightforward, so generalized, so boiled down to its absolute barest bones that, as anyone who's tried to communicate through a long time just via text will realize, you've got to add a whole lot more heart and flavor and everything else to it, because otherwise just a few words really doesn't communicate across much other than the most basic message. It doesn't communicate heart, intent, story, history. For that, you must use far more words. Now then, taking us out of that philosophical and bringing us to what authors really care about, it is the ability to tell your stories. And what I said at the beginning, that you need your stories need you, and the world needs your stories. All of that is captured within this episode. Because as we see in this episode, Sumireko was unable to properly communicate with others because she just couldn't get the words right, and she needed to practice. Writing helped her to grow as an individual. Her stories transformed her. They made her capable of developing friendships, speaking with other people, of empathizing, and by being able to communicate her own thoughts in a proper way to other people. And that is the power of storytelling for Sumireko. But then also, her stories start coming to life. She's able to take all of those muddled thoughts, feelings, emotions, words, and bring them to life in an amazing way, in a way that lifts her up. And even though we haven't yet seen much of her particular story, we know that this story has resonated with someone like Ren. It drew him to her and has thereby put her onto this fantastic adventure, which saved her from this world of writer's block where she was just atrophying within her dusty, smelly apartment. By learning how to write and tell her own stories, Sumireko is able to save herself as a kid and is able to now start saving herself again as an adult. These stories start coming to life in unique and interesting ways. A story of a lost fox, now a story of a lost brother and sister, a story which she will unfold as we go from episode to episode, keeping their memories alive, allowing them to continue to persist in this world even though they are not of her world. And by giving them that life through that story, that is something that really authors can resonate with, because as we write, as we create, we bestow life upon these things that we love so much. But even beyond that, even beyond what it does for the author and for the story, as we see when those stories go out there into the world, they resonate with other people. Sumireko's childish story that she wrote as a 15-year-old resonated with this lost boy, Ren, and brought him into her orbit, and thus put them on this journey and adventure. And there is a curiosity waiting for her story to be put into this wandering bookstore. And the reason for that is because this curiosity understands that every story has meaning, every story has worth. Even though some stories might be really awful, that doesn't matter, because those stories need to go out into the world in order to educate others, in order to help others, in order to help others find their own voices, and to better understand themselves by playing through these stories that are there on the pages. They don't need to see themselves on the page, not at all, but rather that what's happening within these stories is something that they can relate to, or something that inspires them, something that might terrify them, something that educates them, or something that gets them just to think slightly differently, or maybe just simply gives them an escape somewhere else. And in that escapism, they're able to find meaning, life, love, and maybe their own journey beyond just the escape. That is the power and beauty of stories, is that they mean so much to the people who crack them open and begin reading them. That is why storytellers must put their stories out there into the world. It's not just for their own benefit or for their stories to have life, but because the world is actively awaiting everyone's stories. Now then, obviously, not everyone's stories are received well. We've already seen that happen with Sumireko. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't any meaning. It doesn't mean that the journey isn't worth it. And that doesn't mean that even if you end up blundering along as an author and are completely ridiculed by the industry, that there isn't at least one person out there who needs your story. And that is why I've come to absolutely love Mysterious Disappearances, because the opening of the story, combined with this arc right here, told me that at the heart of hearts, for Mysterious Disappearances, it ain't about the girls, it ain't about the jiggle physics, it ain't about the plot, but it is about storytelling. So that is my quick breakdown of this past episode, my analysis, and my message to all other authors out there. And I hope that's one that you do take to heart, because it is something that the world definitely needs more of. So, with that being said, then allow me to shamelessly pitch my own stories out there. I have written numerous books. You can check them out. Links are in the description below. That would really help out this struggling author and YouTuber out here on the interwebs a whole bunch. Or if you can't do that, then liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing if you haven't already done so would really help out. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible adventure we call writing. And until the next episode of Mysterious Disappearances, y'all, let's see if we can find a wandering bookstore. And juice.